Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Chulalongkorn University Faculty of Arts International Arts Talk Series. I am Joey Andrew Santos, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Before we proceed to the talk proper, we would like to acknowledge our participants from Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And at this point, before we proceed, I would like to make some announcements of the house rules. First is please use the name that you registered with us so we could easily monitor your attendance. And second, we would also appreciate it if you could keep your microphone on mute to avoid any unnecessary noise. And lastly, please feel free to send us your question via the Zoom chat, and we'll read the questions on your behalf. But should you wish to ask your question yourself, no worries, feel free to send me a message, or you can just click on the raise hand option so I could recognize you and have your spot to ask your question. So once again, welcome to the second installment of the International Arts Talk series. And in this session, we will be looking into cultural linguistics. Language and culture are linked not only in understanding ideologies imbricated in language practices in use, but also in constructing social life and ways of life. Today, we are honored to delve into this topic titled Time, Shame, and Tenderness, Making Sense of Our Lives in Languages and Cultures. To formally open today's series and to introduce our speaker, let us welcome the Associate Dean on Internationalization and Organizational Image Enhancement, Assistant Professor Dr. Nirada Chitrakra.
Hi, everyone. Well, it's my honor to have Professor Głaz with us here. Well, Professor Adam Głaz and I knew each other since 2018. It was during my first trip to Poland, and it's still my last trip. And it's just through Professor Sriratana who introduced us, and we planned to make connection between our faculty and the UMCS. And we found that the two institutions, our English departments, have lots of things in common. However, we don't have a class that is called cultural linguistics, but I was very sure that our students will be interested in it. And the more he told me about what he's working on, which involves translation and culture, it's amazing that, we don't have something like that here. So anyway, we're glad that today we're going to have Professor Głaz to introduce what he's doing with us here. And before he started his speech, besides many journals that he's written on the topic of cultural linguistics, he also wrote 2 books on extended vantage theory in linguistic application, and also another one, the dynamics meaning extrapolation in the conceptual domain of Earth. So, seeing the book titles, I'm sure that you cannot wait to see what he's going to talk about today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Adam Głaz.
Thank you very much. I feel privileged and honored to be here. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who made this possible. Thanks to Nirada. Thanks to Verita and Joey for organizing this talk. And as much as I would love to see you in person, this is of course a great opportunity for us to make use of this amazing technology and link up in this way. I just want to make sure if my voice is coming through all right, if you can hear me well. Okay, that's good. That's good. Sawadi tuk tan. Ti chempon mane kang ni khop kun krap. I hope that was at least understandable. That's the best I can do in Thai, but I do hope to be able to progress a little bit with your generous help. Now let me launch my presentation and share it with you. Okay. Now I share my screen. How about now? Is the screen there? Can you see it? I mean the slides. Okay, so okay, before we move on to the business proper, I mean, this is where I come from. This is where I'm at. This is a city of Lublin in eastern Poland, in Europe. And Google tells me they take something like just over 17 hours to fly from Lublin to Bangkok, or from Bangkok to Lublin. I think this isn't a non-stop flight. It includes all the transfers. I think you need to transfer at least twice. And there are quite a few people here in the audience who have done that, so they will tell you how it works. So once the pandemic is over, which it will be sooner or later, sooner hopefully rather than later, and we'll be able to travel again, just if you can find 17 hours of free time, just hop on a plane, and it'll be great to welcome you here. A few slides from my university. The one at the top is a different college. It's my university, but it's not the college I work for. But it's just a nice picture, a nice picture. The one at the bottom is the main entrance to my faculty, which is the Faculty of the Humanities. And my university is named after Madame Curie, who was not only the only woman, but the only person who was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2 different sciences. She got the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903 with her husband Pierre, and then 1911 in chemistry. Most of her time, most of her academic career, she worked in Paris, France, but she was Polish, although she was married to a Frenchman, Pierre Curie, with whom he got the first Nobel Prize. And interestingly, her daughter also got the Nobel Prize in physics, as far as I remember. So it's a great scientific family and a great person. Okay, now, language and culture. If you look at this poster, this is a poster for a play by John Osborne. John Osborne was one of the major British playwrights of the 20th century, and this play, Look Back in Anger, is one of the landmarks in the development of British theatre of the 20th century. If you consider the title, you may know it. If you do, regardless of whether you do or don't know it, how would you interpret that expression, look back in anger? What is going on? Does anyone have an idea? It's a little mysterious the first time you see it. What is the meaning here? You look back where? You look back at what? I suppose if you have an idea of how to interpret this, maybe you can post it through chat, or you can just switch on your mic for a while and give your feedback.
Look back at the past.
That's right. That's correct. It's looking back into the past, even though past isn't mentioned here. There is no reference to time. There is no reference to past, present, or future. We only have reference to space, looking back. But it so happens that in English, looking back is looking into the past. Or when you look into the past, you look back. The past is behind us. The future is in front of us. That is the understanding of time that is projected through the English language. So in order to make my point here is that in order to make sense of that title and many other expressions, we need to consider language as a cognitive and cultural phenomenon. And that's what we'll be doing throughout this talk. So in English, time is conceptualized as space. It's a horizontal arrangement with the past behind us and the future in front of us. So if you look, when you want to consider the past, you need to look back, okay? But that isn't universal. That isn't universal. There's a language in Brazil, a Mundawa language, it's a minority language, it's an endangered language. I think right now it's spoken by fewer than 100 people, some place in the Amazon jungle in Brazil, where they also have a horizontal arrangement of understanding of time, which is conceptualized as space, but with the opposite polarities. The future is behind, the past is in front of us. So when you compare these two, it looks a little nonsensical. Why should human beings conceptualize the same phenomenon in these two different ways? But there's a motivation behind each of these. For English speakers, we move towards the future. So the arrow points to the future, and the human figure moves towards future. The understanding in Amundawa is that you can see the past, but you cannot see the future. So if you can see your past, that means that you have to face it. You have to be facing it. So we have a somewhat different cognitive experience, but each of these experiences makes some sense, and it motivates the linguistic expressions that you find in those languages. But again, that is not universal. You have languages like Mandarin Chinese, and if we have Chinese speakers here, I don't really speak Chinese, so we have Chinese speakers here, they can prove me right, or they can corroborate this idea, this interpretation, that in Mandarin Chinese, there's a spatial arrangement of time, but it's a vertical arrangement. Earlier is up, later is down. And I suppose that has to do with gravitation. When you have something, when you pick up an object and drop it, then at some point in time, it's right there in the air, but a little later, because of gravitation, it falls down and it's down there on the ground. Okay? It's a possible motivation. I'm not sure that that's the correct one, but that sounds like a logical motivation for this arrangement. You can also think of your own language, Thai, or any other language that you speak. We might have speakers of different languages here. So try to consider how that goes with Thai. I mean, what do you have in Thai? Does this sound anything similar to the Thai conceptualization?
Yeah. If my understanding is right, I just feel like we don't actually have past and present or future tense.
Okay.
That is what I feel.
But then in all these languages, English and Mundawa and Mandarin, time is conceptualized in terms of space. Okay, back, front, up, down, these are spatial terms. Is that the case in Thai as well, or does it sound nonsensical to a Thai speaker?
I would assume that Thai would match the English. Like we in the future there would be the arrow in the front as well. That's what I
feel. Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, this is something for you to think about, to conceptualize, to think of your own language, how it relates to these other languages. Anyway, my point here is that these observations take us to Edward Sapir, one of the major figures in 20th century linguistics, an American linguist of early 20th century, who, among other things, proposed that the languages we speak take us to different realities, different worlds. Let's go through this quote, this little quote from his work. No two languages are ever sufficiently similar to be considered as representing the same social reality. The worlds in which different societies live are distinct worlds, not merely the same world with different labels attached. Okay, so we live in different, because you speak Thai, I speak Polish, we all speak English, but we also speak different languages. So we live in these distinct worlds. But what does it mean? I mean, what is going on here? What kind of worlds do we have in mind? Of course, it's not only that we live in different places. You're in Bangkok, you may be in many other places. I'm here in Lublin, Poland. So these are different places, but that's not what Sophia really had in mind. Let's go through two examples. Example number one is when you have words and concepts that are transferred from one language and culture to another, but these don't fit. And my illustration comes from Persian or Farsi, the language spoken in Iran. And I rely here on the work by Farzad Sharifian, an Iranian linguist who worked in Australia for a number of years and who sadly passed away last year or the year before, rather unexpectedly. Anyway, in one of his books, he quotes this example, a situation that he probably witnessed, or maybe even his own personal experience. It's probably taking place either at an American university or perhaps Australian university with an American lecturer and an Iranian foreign student. And then the situation is that the student has asked the lecturer to write a letter of recommendation for her. And the professor says, okay, why not? I will write you the letter. And the next day approaches the student and says, here's your letter. And the student says, I'm ashamed. And that, of course, is very surprising for the American professor. He's bewildered by the student's response and asks, what have you done? Why should you be ashamed? There's nothing to be ashamed of. Okay, that's very surprising. But that's because the student has transferred the Persian or the Farsi concept from her own culture and just encoded that in a foreign language. So if you compare the Persian cultural model, so to speak, with the cultural model of American English shame, you see the clear differences. I also added to this table the Polish cultural model and lots of question marks for Thai. That's for you to consider. How does Thai come into this? You use the Persian, you activate the Persian model when you offer goods to someone. That doesn't really work for American English. Probably not. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. Definitely doesn't work for Polish. Then we have situations when you request goods and services or you ask for help from someone. And okay, this may invoke a little bit of shame, maybe uncertainty, apprehension, anxiety on the part of the person who does the asking. And that works perhaps for American English and Polish. Then apologizing, definitely, that's where American English comes into play, and Polish as well. And expressing gratitude, which is what this student has done here. But that is totally out of place, so to speak, for an American speaker or a Polish speaker. We don't really, I mean, shame is not something that we would use in American English in this kind of situation, and definitely not in Polish. So that's the source of this misunderstanding. We might also have a slightly different case where different cultures use the same language. But for one of these cultures, this isn't the native language. Okay, so the question is, if it isn't native, is it in fact the same language? Well, not an easy thing to decide, an open question. And again, another example from the same author, Farzad Sharifian, which has to do with Australia. If we have someone from Australia here, they might be able to relate to that. In speakers of Australian English, Anglo-Australian English speakers, say things like, this land is mine, this land belongs to me. And you buy a piece of land and it's yours, okay? However, in contrast to that, Aboriginal speakers of Australian English, who also speak English, but who are Aboriginal people of Australia, would never say that. They would rather say, this land is me. And that's very surprising for the Anglo audience, and myself including. I mean, this land is me. I would never conceptualize land in these terms. Why is this so? Okay, there's an Anglo-Australian script for land and Aboriginal Australian script or model for land. For Anglo-Australians, land is a possession, is a commodity. So you can transfer that possession for money. You can say, I own this land because I'm Australian. I have the legal right to own it, and therefore I decide what to do with it. Aboriginal Australian speakers of English don't conceptualize land in that way. They have a totemic connection with land, a mystical relationship with a spirit being, and here land. And the land was here before humans. Therefore, the land owns us. We don't own it, it owns us. And therefore, we have reciprocal responsibilities towards each other. Okay, and I'm again wondering, how does Thai enter into this? Would it be more like Anglo-Australian or Aboriginal Australian model? What would you say? Well, I leave this question open and consider it, maybe it's very different, but it's neither this nor that. Just do a little brainstorming on your own mind. Okay, now this takes us to partial conclusions to these points. I mean, we back to Spear. I hope these examples show that words are not simply labels. They don't just label things objectively. They take us to different realities. So concepts or linguistic concepts that are encoded in language, they build a certain cultural and symbolic sphere in which we live. We live within the symbolic sphere that language is built for us. So this is our natural habitat. A natural habitat, a natural environment is not simply the physical environment where we live, but it's a symbolic culture. A culture or cultures that languages that we speak build for us, or rather, we might say that we are building, continually building and rebuilding through the use of language. And my claim here for the rest of this talk is that in order for this to happen, for this to work interculturally, interlinguistically, we need translation. Okay, and of course, I mean, this is not a terribly original thing to say, but let me explain what I mean. We'll go through two examples, two kinds of exercise. One is comes from the work of this person, Olga Tokarczuk, the Polish novelist, the Nobel Prize winner for 2018. And I was very happy to learn that my friend Verita teaches Olga as part of her course, which is fantastic. So that's as far as I mean, we just discussed this before the class, before the lecture. There are no Thai translations of her work yet, but there's quite a few books by that author in English, and I'm showing you a few covers of the English translations of some of her novels, except for the one in the top right corner. That's a Polish cover. This is still being translated into English, so it's not out on the market yet. Anyway, I'd like to, before we move on to discuss my specific example, this example doesn't come from any of her novels. It comes from the Nobel lecture that she delivered in December 2019 at the Swedish Academy. As you know, each Nobel Prize laureate is expected to give a lecture upon receiving the prize, the award. Olga's lecture was on a concept that she devised, the so-called tender narrator. So I'm going to play a little clip of a few minutes, just the beginning of this lecture, just for you to see what kind of person she is. It's available online, it's in Polish, but we're just going to go through a few first minutes just for for the sake of introduction. I hope it comes through all right together with the sound. The beginning of the clip is rather silent, then they start speaking towards the end, and most of the speaking, there's a little bit of that in English, but most of this is in Polish. Let me try now. I probably need to stop sharing and okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Swedish Academy. I'm extremely happy to be able to present to you the Nobel lectures of two extraordinary writers. 2018 Nobel Prize laureate in literature Olga Tokarczuk and the laureates of 2019 Nobel Prize in literature Peter Handke. Olga Tokarczuk will be presenting her presentation in Polish. Peter Handke will be presenting his in German. You have had translations on your way in. There's no need at all for lavish introductions, so 2018 Nobel Prize winner Olga Tokarczuk, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, pierwsze zdjęcie, jakie świadomie przeżyłam, to zdjęcie mojej matki, zanim mnie jeszcze urodziła. Zdjęcie jest niestety czarno-białe, przez co ginie wiele szczegółów, stając się zaledwie szarymi kształtami. Światło jest miękkie i deszczowe, chyba wiosenne, i najpewniej sączy się przez okno, utrzymując pokój w ledwie zauważalnym blasku. Mama siedzi przy starym radiu, takim, które miało zielone oko i dwa pokrętła. Jedno do regulowania głośności, drugie do wyszukiwania stacji.
I hope it went through all right. Okay. Now, in that lecture, Olga develops the notion of the tender narrator, a fourth person narrator. It's a rather complex kind of a literary construct, but we just go through a couple of excerpts from that lecture to have some basic understanding. She says, I also dream of a new kind of narrator, a fourth person one, who manages to encompass the perspective of each of the characters, as well as having the capacity to step beyond the horizon of each of them, who sees more and has a wider view, and who is able to ignore time. We can regard this figure of a mysterious, tender narrator as miraculous and significant. I write fiction, but it's never pure fabrication. When I write, I have to feel everything inside myself. I have to take a close look at each thing and person with the greatest solemnity and personify them inside myself, personalize them. This is what tenderness serves me for, because tenderness is the art of personifying, of sharing feelings, and thus endlessly discovering similarities. Tenderness personalizes everything to which it relates, making it possible to give it a voice, to give it the space and the time to come into existence and to be expressed. Tenderness is the most modest form of love. Tenderness is deep emotional concern about another being, its fragility, its unique nature, and its lack of immunity to suffering and the effects of time. Tenderness perceives the bonds that connect us, the similarities and sameness between us. Literature is built on tenderness toward any being other than ourselves. It is the basic psychological mechanism of the novel. By the way, by profession, Tokarczuk is a psychologist, so she has this psychological side to it. Okay, so when you hear tenderness as an English speaker, what comes to mind is, I mean, we all have all kinds of associations. Perhaps as an English speaker, as an English reader, an association might be with Francis Scott Fitzgerald's novel, Tender is the Night, as a great novel. Okay? Or it may be, I mean, the title of the novel, by the way, comes from another work in English, a poem by John Keats from early 19th century. So that might be another association that you might have. Or you might have association with Michael Bolton's song, Time, Love and Tenderness. And I've been told that the title of this talk actually alludes to that, song, which was not intentional. I mean, if it so happened, then okay, fine. But it was totally unintentional. But if it sounded similar or elusive, I can only be happy. So we have all kinds of association expectations to come with the term. But of course, we need to remember that it comes from Polish. It's a translation from Polish. So instead of tender narrator and tenderness, there are these original Polish words, czuły narrator and czułość, which for many of you will be rather mysterious. And as I go through examples, you can think of equivalent or parallel, maybe not equivalent, but parallel constructions in Thai or in other languages that you speak. So what comes with the Polish notion, the tender narrator in Polish? Well, we have the verb czuć, all kinds of nouns and gerunds, czucie, odczucie, uczucie, odczuwanie. They all have to do with feeling or feelings, sensing, sensation, and emotion. There's also a noun współczucie, which means compassion. And if you divide it into morphemes, its literal meaning, its morphological structure tells you that it has to do with co-feeling, common feeling, compassion as a common feeling, a community of feeling, especially of pain, of suffering, being able to emphatically engage oneself in another person's feeling or pain. So these are the common associations that come with the Polish notion. How about English? Now that's similar, but not quite the same. That's distinctly different. Okay, we have verbs tend or attend, and nouns attendance, attention. So the verb tend takes us to notions of looking after someone, serving someone, or attending with care. You tend the sick, you tend a fire, you pay attention to it. You can attend a church, attend a lecture. You can attend to a sick person. You can be conscientious in your work. You attend to your work. You attend to a speaker and you listen to them carefully, and so on. Attendance is being present, or it relates to service or help or aid that you provide. Attention is focus and preoccupation with detail. So if you compare these two, the Polish and the English, you see the difference. Okay, Polish is more into feeling, sensation, emotion, and compassion. English is more into looking after, service, attention, attendance, being present in a kind of mindful fashion with a focus on detail. Okay, so what happens in translation is that perhaps we have lost something, and that's a normal kind of a regular way of looking at translation when you lose things. And what we have lost in transferring czułość into tenderness is a focus on feeling and sensation. However, we have also gained something. We focus on the focus on attentiveness, attention to detail. That's not really present in the Polish, that comes with the English. So there's a loss and there's gain. Okay? So with the English translation, there comes this new dimension or dimensions that are absent from Polish or rather latent in Polish, and they are brought into relief through the English translation. And if you consider the other translations to other languages that I'm aware of, I know that lecture has been translated into Swedish, French, Portuguese, not yet into Thai. There may be other translations around which I'm not aware of. But I suppose if you consider these translations of Tokarczuk's original notion, you should be able to see all kinds of other dimensions that are not so clear in the Polish, but that come as important in those languages. So back to Sapir. We are dealing here with conceptual and cultural worlds. They are distinct, but they are congruent. They can be calibrated. They can migrate from one language to another or from one lingua culture to another. And that allows us for dialogue. So I'd like to see translation here not really as something that facilitates dialogue, but something that is a dialogical kind of procedure in its own right. Translation is a form of dialogue. We engage in dialogue by the very act of translating and activating these different notions in different lingua cultures. My second exemplification, my second exercise, has to do with the notion of the heart, the English heart, and the Polish counterpart to it, serce. But of course, I won't be looking at the whole sphere. It's an extremely rich and thick concept, thick in the sense of thickness in the understanding of Clifford Geertz, the anthropologist who came up with the notion of thickness and thick description. Geertz applied this to anthropology, but I can easily think of a linguistic side to it. A thick kind of description would be a description of linguistic meaning that involves the context as it is interpreted by the speakers, not only as it looks to an outside observer, but as it is interpreted by the speakers themselves. So it takes note of the subjectivity characteristic of the speakers. Let's try. In order to deal with the heart and the thickness of that notion, I propose to use these two terms, these two constructs, cultural mindset and cultural models. Now, they are related in a peculiar way, but they are not the same. When you go through the literature on the heart, there's quite a lot of literature around on how the heart is interpreted in all kinds of languages. There seems to be a certain shared European cultural mindset. You have all these different languages, but they do have a common denominator. So a cultural mindset, according to James Underhill, a linguist that I'm going to refer here, is a certain worldview or a system of beliefs or general attitude to life that migrates, that is common, that comes from language, but that isn't necessarily tied to a single language. It migrates from one language to another. So it extends beyond the boundaries of a specific culture. That's why we talk about a shared European cultural mindset of the heart. But it is expressed in various languages as cultural models. So these cultural models, culture-specific models, are mental representations shared by members of a given culture. You can have a diagrammatic, rather simplified, but I hope illustrative illustration of that. You've got this common cultural mindset and all kinds of cultural models within it, partly overlapping, but also distinct, with the English heart, the French cœur, the German Herz, the Polish serce, or the Czech srdce, and so on and so forth. It's of course open-ended. So when we talk about the European notion of the heart, it goes back to the Proto-Indo-European notion the notion that originated with Proto-European, the Proto-European Indo-European language and the Proto-Indo-European community of speakers, where the heart had these two basic meanings, either the human organ or the essence of something, or both at the same time. Okay, that's why this is what it has in common right now in the European cultural mindset, which might be different from Thai. It's also typically associated with life, with one's psyche, perceptions, desires, feelings, memory, and courage. For instance, if you think of the French word cœur for the heart, it's related to courage etymologically, or courage. Okay, and that's also related, not so clearly, but it is related to the English heart, the German Herz, or the Polish serce or Czech serce. These also have etymological connections that ultimately boil down to the Proto-European notion, Proto-Indo-European. But specifically, I'll be looking at one specific example from the work of this author, Joseph Conrad, and his novella, Heart of Darkness. Of course, no need to introduce Conrad to you, a British writer of Polish origin, by the way, but basically a British writer, who interestingly did not speak fluent English until his 20s. And he always spoke with a very heavy Polish accent until the end of his life. He was not a great speaker of English. Apparently, his best foreign language was French. But nevertheless, he is regarded as one of the greatest novelists to write in the English language. So his writing was much better than his spoken command. He was also a sailor, of course, and his novels and stories very often have this nautical setting. However, this was only a pretext. He mainly concentrated on the human psyche, the human spirit, when that spirit is challenged by all kinds of circumstances. He considered human honor, valor, loyalty, betrayal, and generally human nature. And being a sailor, he also visited lots of places in Asia, including Bangkok. And there's a funny story about Bangkok and many other places in Asia. Who some of the hotels in these places, including the Oriental Hotel in Bangkok, I have found out, claims that Conrad stayed there for a while when he sailed. Although that's very unlikely. He was a man of sea, and it's very unlikely that he would go for luxury lodging. So he probably lodged aboard his ship in the Bangkok harbor. But lots of places claim that, including Singapore and Hong Kong and so on. I mean, it's an interesting thing to discuss and to find out, although that doesn't really it's not directly relevant to his work. Now, his Heart of Darkness. Well, it's a story that's being narrated by a character called Charles Marlowe, who is Conrad's impersonation, his alter ego, you can say, and he sits with a bunch of his friends on a boat at the River Thames in London, and tells his story of his quest in Africa up the Congo River to find an ivory trader called Kurt, who was very successful, but who apparently underwent some kind of psychological trauma and built his own kingdom in the heart of Africa, in the heart of Congo. So Marlowe's mission is to find Kurt and bring him to line. Now, the title is crucial here. The title, The Heart of Darkness, is inherently oxymoronic. It links concrete, organic, and good heart with abstract, inorganic, and bad darkness. Heart is stereotypically good, darkness is stereotypically bad, and they are coalesced into this oxymoronic title. And of course, it's ambiguous. It comes through lexical and structural ambiguity, and these are two covers, or covers of two editions of Conrad's work that show different interpretations of that title. It can mean either the center, the heart as the center of darkness, the center of the dark continent, and that's the cover on the left-hand side. Okay, we have this boat going up the river into the center of Africa. Or it can mean the human heart, the human organ that is ruled by dark forces, or even metonymically, a diabolically evil person. And that's the cover on the right. Now it capitalizes on that notion of the heart itself being dark. So Conrad is playing here with these two interpretations of the title, which is of course an intentional maneuver. You might be familiar with all kinds of adaptations of that novella. The film with John Malkovich, Heart of Darkness, or a readaptation of this idea by Francis Ford Coppola in his magnificent movie Apocalypse Now, which moves the setting from Africa to Vietnam during the Vietnam War. It's very, very powerful film. There's also there are also two Thai translations. That's the cover of one of them, and I thank Professor Verita for directing me to these books. Apparently, I mean, Google Translator tells me the title here means the Heart of Doom. Perhaps it does, perhaps it doesn't. You can think of this and correct it if that's wrong. But what I find interesting about it is that apparently the notion of the heart here is not only the heart, but it's the heart, soul, and mind at the same time. So it's a broad notion. But this is my marginal comment. That's rather for you to think about and to give me some feedback if you wish. I was concentrating on Conrad's heart and the Polish counterpart to it in two crucial moments of the novella, the title and the final sentence. The final sentence of the story alludes directly to the title. It's a kind of a repetition of the title, a closure. So let's start with the title, Heart of Darkness. Obviously, when you translate the heart, you don't translate heart itself, you translate the title as a whole, Heart of Darkness. There are 7 translations of the work into Polish. I know of 7. There may be more, but I don't think so. And out of the 7 translations, 6 have the same title. That's the one at the top, Jądro ciemności. The problem is, not a problem, but a crucial thing about that translation is that its literal meaning doesn't allude to the heart. It means the core of darkness, which only focuses on one of the possible meanings, the meaning center, but not the heart. The heart is gone from the title, except for one translation from 2015 by Jacek Dukaj, who actually does use serce. So you have serce ciemności, and that invokes these two meanings, the human organ plus the center with the inherent ambiguity that comes with the syntax. So why is Dukaj doing this? Is he merely being original, perhaps provocative with respect to the other translators? He says, I'm going to do it differently. I don't care what you've done. I'm going to do it my own way, which is, of course, every translator's right. Or perhaps at the same time, is he trying to go back to the primeval semantics of the heart and bringing that out from Conrad's work? In order to see that, perhaps try and answer these questions, let's look at the final sentence of the novella. When the story is over, Marlowe finishes his story. They sit on this boat. It's getting dark. Perhaps it is dark. It's after sunset, and they sit there listening to Marlowe's story. When he finishes the story, they find themselves in this kind of gloomy atmosphere on the River Thames, which is misty, which is foggy, which is kind of ominous. So that's the final sentence. The offing was barred by a black bank of clouds, and the tranquil waterway leading to the uttermost ends of the earth flowed somber under an overcast sky, seemed to lead into the heart of an immense darkness. So you have this ominous, portentous, gloomy atmosphere here, and the direct repetition of the title, allusion to the title, the heart of darkness. So what do the translators do with it? I mean, they do all kinds of things. 3 translations repeat what they have done to the title. They use the same word. The word that means core, the essence. So there's a consistent imagery between the title and the final sentence, but without the heart. There is no heart. One translation from 2016 uses the word for the heart, serce, but there's jądro in the title. So you have 2 different words. One is used in the title, the other one is used in this final sentence. So the imagery is inconsistent. You have one here and something else there. Inconsistent imagery. There's no sense of closure. 2 other translators use different words. W głąb niezmierzonej ciemności, which means into the depths of an immeasurable darkness. Wnętrze, inside the impenetrable, sinister darkness. So again, these are not the words that they use for the title, and they don't have much to do with the heart. So again, the imagery is inconsistent and without the heart. And there's one translation, the one that stands out, Dukaj's 2015, who uses serce in both places, the Polish word for the heart. So you have that in the title, you have both meanings in the title, the organ plus the center, and you have that in the final image, in the final clause. So the imagery is consistent, it invokes the heart, and it provides a good sense of closure. So what Dukaj is doing here is that he's playing, and both Konrad and Dukaj, his translator, they are both playing with the polysemy of the English heart or the Polish serce, and by doing that, they invoke 2 or perhaps even 3 major senses. I've been talking about 2 major senses, but there may in fact be 3. It means the organ, the human organ, which is the seat for emotions, the center, but something more than the center, the actual essence, quintessence, the very nature of things. What are the take-home lessons from this exercise? Well, I would say that back to cultural models of cultural mindset, Konrad's and Dukaj, his translators' original versions, represent distinct cultural models. One is in English, one is in Polish, but models that can be calibrated and translated within the more general cultural mindset. So we're back again to the notion of cultural mindset, which is a broader notion, some that encompasses notions and concepts that can migrate between languages. And within that, we have distinct cultural models that go with specific lingua cultures. My conclusions. I mean, what do we say when we look back into John Osborne's Looking Back in Anger, into examples with The Shame and the Land, and Olga Tokarczuk's Tenderness, and Konrad's Heart? I can think of no better conclusion to these examples than this quote from the German philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer, who considered the nature of communication and how communication plays with the way we perceive the world, how language comes into that process, and who says something like that: if by entering foreign language worlds notice again, he's talking about language worlds, similarly to Sapir, okay? Distinct worlds that come with languages. So if by entering foreign language worlds, we overcome the prejudices and limitations of our previous experience of the world, this does not mean that we leave and negate our own world. One doesn't exclude the other. Like travelers, we return home with new experiences. So when you go from Tokarczuk's czułość to tenderness, you also go back. I'm purposefully putting the bidirectional arrow here. It's not only translation from Polish into English, but the English takes you back to Polish and wants you to reconsider Polish in the new light. The same goes with Conrad's Hearts of Darkness. It's translated as perhaps Serce ciemności, but then again makes you think of the original heart. And if you do that into a number of other languages, you would have these very rich conceptual spheres within a broader cultural mindset. So let me close by invoking James Underhill again. In a private conversation that we once had, he said something very simple, but something that struck me as very, very appropriate. If we aren't translating, we aren't talking. Okay, I mean, we have to translate. And people have been engaged in translation since time immemorial, and we all do that in all kinds of situations, not only in literature but in everyday life, and that's a necessary thing. So translation here is not only something that facilitates communication, that facilitates dialogue, but something that is a communicative and dialogic behavior in its own right. I'm also, I'm providing my references here. I'd be happy to share that presentation with you for those of you who are interested, so you have access to the references. This is my final slide. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to talk to you if you feel like inquiring or sharing your comments, your views on these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Adam. Based on your talk, like Jen, a slice of culture and language production and negotiate. It is like time for culture under this. Likewise, it switch into different experiences and brings different perspectives. So thanks a lot, Professor Adam, for an insightful talk on cultural linguistics through translation. At this point, we would like to welcome questions from our participants. If you wish to ask your question yourself, feel free to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and you can go ahead and address your question. But if you don't feel like doing that, just send the message via chat box and I'll be happy to read that for you.
Okay, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you very much for such an insightful talk, and it's very nice to see Olga Tokarczuk. I am a big fan, huge fan of her, as you know, and for everyone here, if you haven't read Olga Tokarczuk, please read her work. I'm actually an ambassador for her. One thing I would like to share, Adam, and also for the participants here, is that I was thinking about the Thai word for tender, for not tender, but for shuli, you know, the tender in Polish, and I think that what we could come up with right now might be something along the line of the Polish mianki or łagodny. I think something like the Thai word is actually lamom, you know, pulau and lamom, you know, on your lamom. And I think that interestingly, when you said, you know, translation kind of brings some sort of like an afterlife to the original source. The word, I think this Thai word is very interesting for those who would like to pursue, and I would encourage, because I have to say I'm not a very good translator. For those who would like to pursue this, you know, because the word lamom is actually used a lot in the Thai translation of the Holy Bible, and it's actually depicting the Sacred Heart of Jesus, that he is actually suffering, and he's actually also, I cannot actually translate lamom into English that much, but it's like it's very close to to miękki, you know, like soft, łagodny. It has something to do with Olga's choice of words as well. So I don't know. I have to ask the Thai speakers here what they think. How would they translate? But they have to read first, right? How would they translate the tender?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, if you, Verita, if you yourself or anyone else wants to translate that lecture into Thai, which would be a great thing to do, as much as I can help, I'd be happy to participate in that and help you with the insight into Polish. With that word that you're mentioning, I think the Polish words that you mentioned, miękki and łagodny, they're all related to the tenderness and to what Tokarczuk is talking about. My Polish intuition tells me that right now, from the top of my head, I would say that miękki might have, they both mean soft, but miękki might have these, sometimes at least, these negative connotations. Miękki can mean too soft, yielding, not resistant enough, or you can when you talk about people as people can be miękki, okay, yeah, they can be soft, or they are not adamant, they don't stand by their views, and they are easily influenced and vulnerable. So it might have these connotations. Łagodny is a little different, because that can mean a purposeful attitude. I can choose to be hard on you and cruel towards you, but I decide not to. Okay, and that probably comes closer to Jesus' heart and the biblical notion of God. God is powerful, God is omnipresent, God can do anything to you. It's just that he doesn't want that. He's loving, he's the kind of being that wants the best for you. Not because he cannot hurt you, he can, but he will never do that because he's łagodny. Okay, whether to talk about the God as being miękki that would sound a little strange for me. But łagodny, definitely so. Okay? So yeah, another huge area in Thai that opens for us to explore.
Yeah, because the word lamam is, of course, it's soft, but when it's used in the context of the Holy Bible, it's łagodny. That's why it's interesting that these two things combined in this particular word. But yeah, challenge is there for all of us to translate.
Lots of translators have struggled with Olga's notion, and I don't really speak Portuguese. I don't really read Portuguese. I need other people to help me in Portuguese. But there's a Portuguese translation of this lecture where apparently the translator uses 3 or 4 different words for tenderness throughout the lecture, which personally I don't think it's a good idea, because you have, it kind of diffuses the notion and you don't really know what you're talking about. But then it shows how difficult it is to deal with. So the translator is probably trying to bring out all these different nuances and uses these different Portuguese words to come up with some kind of coherent image. I'm not really sure if it works for Portuguese. If our Portuguese speakers here, I'd be happy to share the translation with you. I do think we need just one word for that notion to hang together throughout the lecture, throughout the whole piece. But I understand that the choice might sometimes be dreadfully difficult, and you can blame that Portuguese translator to actually struggling with all these Portuguese words and not being able to decide, or perhaps purposefully deciding to use many, hoping that the reader will get the full picture by combining all of them into the more general notion.
And just to say, just one last thing, and I will keep quiet and let other people speak. Is when you said, when you mentioned the Thai translation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and the word, the title which I sent to you, Harutai Hang Antakan, which is the the recent translation in Thai, Antagan, well, they're actually not Thai, they're like Sanskrit and Pali. Antagara is actually a Pali, and there's even a sutta, which is like a text scripture called Antagara Sutta. So when you said that it might mean doom, Antagara can also mean that way. It's like it can also mean ignorance, darkness, even blindness. So possibly it can also mean doom. I mean, the Sanskrit and Pali, in my personal view, the meanings are actually allocated to them. They were actually quite wide, and no wonder people like this recent translation. Then I don't know if anyone knows of the previous translation, หัวใจมืด หัวใจมืด. That is like, it kind of lose the kind of metaphorical dimension to the word heart. In Conrad's Heart of Darkness, it's not only not only heart, but also, you know, the inner beings, the core of things. I think the Sanskrit and Pali, that's what Thais like to turn to Sanskrit and Pali. I think they're actually quite, the spectrum of the words actually quite wide. So you're right when you said it may mean doom in that way.
I took it from Google Translate. I mean, I put a question mark next to it because I cannot possibly judge. That's what Google told me.
It's possible too, yes.
But of course, Google does what it does. I mean, it's very simple and it doesn't have all these nuances. But yeah, it's very interesting. Very
Thank
interesting.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Verita.
Thank you so much, Ajahn Verita. Is there anyone who would like to ask questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
I understand these examples I gave you might be a little difficult for you to struggle with because of the Polish. So you don't need to relate to those. We can talk about anything that interests you within this area.
I might ask Joey though. The word puso, heart, you know, in the Filipino language. I don't know. I'm struggling. I was trying to find the root of it. I just know the Cebuano, the puso, you know, the food. Do you know? We're talking about Tagalog here.
Right. I think we have someone who can best discuss it. I think Jason is with us tonight. I mean today.
Jason, hello.
Yeah, I think he can best discuss about Tagalog language, particularly. We were talking about it earlier while Professor Adam was delivering his talk about translation in Filipino. And I think it's going to be quite interesting for him to share it with us. Jason, are you here?
Oh, wait. Sorry, I was in another meeting. So, okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, actually, my dissertation is about Filipino emotion words. So, one of the things that I discussed there is really the concept of heart. Actually, concept of heart, the concept of feelings in Filipino language, and what I would like actually to share with the group now is that the things that our good speaker mentioned a while ago, based on the things that I heard, no, because I'm in two meetings actually. It's also the same thing that we have also in Tagalog, in Filipino language. The concept of heart is actually, or the concept of feeling, the concept of emotion it's quite difficult it's difficult actually to divide the cognitive and the feeling in our concept, which is damdamin. Okay, so the word damdamin is equivalent to feeling, to emotion, and you cannot divide it based on if it's more on into more into the emotion part or the cognitive part. When it comes to puso, I'm not really I don't have the I mean I didn't trace it in my study, but just like what our speaker told us, puso is also, it's encompassing, same as damdamin in Tagalog. Puso is encompassing because it can also mean center. It can also mean the heart, which is the organ. Um, like like when you say uh, um, what example, it's nasa puso ng dagat, or nasa puso ng I cannot think of a particular, but we also talk about, we also use puso as something that denotes center, and then also heart. But what is interesting also, I think the Malay speaker can also agree with me, is that puso is, it's not just the centralization of Filipino emotions is not only in puso, but it's in the liver, because of the the words that we have. Like, I think the Malay also has this, the luwalhati, which is something equivalent to glory, glorious. So luwalhati, it's like, luwal is something like you, it's hati is the liver, and then it's something like you're too light. That's why you feel so light, and your liver is too light, and you feel happy, you feel glorious. But when you are sad, no, or when you are sorrowful, so it's like dalamhati. So the hati, or the liver, it's is it's like carrying something heavy. So 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 hati is also an old Tagalog word that we use, that connotes emotions, feelings.
Mhm. Thank you. Thanks very much. It's interesting that you mentioned the liver. I mean, usually quite a few organs within the human body that are harnessed into expressing these notions. It's either the heart, or the liver, or the kidneys, and the brain as well. No, but the liver and the kidneys are very, I mean, the kidneys is a very much a biblical notion. You know, somehow for the Hebrew people in the Torah, the kidney is the heart as well, but the kidney is the essence of the human being. When in the Psalms you read things like, "You, God, have created, you have shaped my kidneys." Okay, that is, you made me what I am. You made me who I am. So it's an interesting thing, and also that brings to mind it's not really the case in Polish. The liver is not really the seat for emotions or the thinking in Polish, but we do have this one expression when you say something is sitting on my liver. That means I have a problem, or I have some kind of anxiety. Or you can ask another person, "What's wrong with you? Is there something? Tell me what's on your liver." It's colloquial, very informal, and I don't think it's very productive. I think it's just this one expression, but it's quite common. No? So there seems to be something to do with the liver that is a purifying kind of, this function in the body is to purify things, you know, these liquids, and to get rid of the bad stuff. So if there's something malfunctioning in the liver, then you have a problem. Okay, so that's an interesting link, I think.
Thank you so much, Professor Adam, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
Professor Adam. Thank you very much.
All right. Is there anyone who would like to ask another question? All right, go on.
Just a quick one. I think the liver, the reference to liver, is it associated with the medieval humor, like bile, choleric, sanguine?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes.
Because I think the Czech has it too. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. Of course. Mm-hmm.
is Heart of Darkness I don't, because, you know, Filipinos can read English anyway, but I was thinking, how would you translate Heart of Darkness into Tagalog? Pusong Dilim? Ano ba yan?
No, no. Like uh we use centro. Most people will probably use centro, but if you will be very particular with Tagalog, probably you will use ubod, the ubod ng kadiliman.
I've been thinking why out of the 7 Polish translations, why it is not the word for the heart that is used in most of the titles. You know, 6 out of 7 do not use the word heart. And it may be just following the early tradition. The first translation came in 1930. The novella itself was written, I think, 1899, at the turn of the 20th century. Then the first Polish translation came something like 30 years later. And this first translation may have simply set the path, set the course for all the other translations to follow. And for some reason, she didn't use the word heart for the title. And the rumor has it that the translator was friends with Conrad himself, or at least she knew Conrad, and apparently Conrad himself had something had some say in it, and he probably suggested that she doesn't use the word heart in the title for some reason, and then maybe this set the path for the whole translational series. I don't know why. I mean, maybe because the heart is too positive in its overall imagery in Polish. It's a very positive notion. It's like in English, when you don't have heart, and you don't have the heart to do something, you either lack courage or you lack sympathy, you lack empathy. So having heart means being a good person. So maybe the idea was not to make that title sound too positive, too bright, too light. It's a sinister book. It's an ominous kind of a atmosphere that it creates. So maybe because that was the overall goal, the idea was to avoid this positive image right at the very beginning. I don't know. I'm just my speculation. But then by doing that, the ambiguity is basically lost, and there's a limitation to just one of these meanings rather than the ambiguity which is there in the English original. It's right there from the very start.
Thank you so much, Professor Adam. I think it's quite interesting to look into how is it in Thai. I mean, we've heard from Polish, from Tagalog. How is it in Thai? Is there anyone who would like to share on how heart is, or love is translated in Thai language?
Kukasina and Shayin is here. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Hello.
Yeah, Kukasina. See, two of your professors are here.
So yeah, good afternoon.
And you were in my translation class, and you were good.
Was I? Dzień dobry. Thank you very much, Professor Adam, for the wonderful talk. Also brought a lot of.
How can you speak Polish?
I spent a summer in UCMS as well. UMCS, sorry.
You did?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Oh, great! Fantastic! Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to learn Polish, but some stuck and some didn't. So it was a really wonderful talk and inspired me to go back and brush off my Polish as well.
Yes, great, fantastic.
So you were asking about how heart and love is translated into Thai. So the word for heart in Thai is huat zai, which also means the center of things. We use it for center of things as well. but it's like but the word for love is ความรัก, which Jai is like when you say something, I'm not a really good translator too, but Jai, for me, it evokes this really biological image of the heart. So you wouldn't use it for emotions. So like the emotion of love and the word for heart is like two very distinct things. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Let me just share another screen with you for a while. I've got this slide that I didn't really, okay, let me see. What can I do here? Wait a second, I just need to. Okay, this is the slide I originally wanted to include, but of course you can only include so much in an hour, so I decided not to. Eventually, that's something that I discussed with Professor Nirada over the email a little bit, and she told me that there was some kind of, I mean, this, you know, you get entangled in all these linguistic details that I didn't really follow very well because it's all in Thai, but you might want to look at this little book. It's a very, very short but very fine collection of studies edited by Bert Peters, came out with Rutledge 2 or 3 years ago. It's called Heart and Soul-like Constructs Across Languages, Cultures and Epochs. And one of the contributors, one of the chapters, there are something like 5 or 6 chapters only to the book, but one of the chapters deals with Thai. And this is just a very brief synopsis of what's there. Apparently, the Thai notion for the heart includes all these different areas, semantic areas: knowing, thinking, feeling and feelings, breath, focus and center, and all kinds of mental and psychological states and processes like deliberating, sympathizing, displaying interest, signaling, preparedness, paying attention, memorizing, and also it seems to be a very physical thing. It's conceptualized in terms of all kinds of physical characteristics. It can be warm, hot, cool, cold, spacious, high, light, bright, fluffy, narrow, low, heavy, dark, or rough, which are very, you know, concrete, physical, material kinds of sensations. I don't know. I'm just throwing at you these notions that are there in the, and of course it's very superficial the way I present it. The chapter has something like 20 or 30 pages. So you may want to comment on that or look at what's there. I'd be happy to send it over to you, a PDF perhaps, that I probably have, if anyone interested, and you can see if that author has done a good job on the Thai notion. Any comments? Would anyone have comments as to that?
Well, since okay. I hear myself. I got to the PDF. Professor Glass me because he just asked me to confirm the translation of some phrases. It's just that one of Professor Savetnan's comments is on ใจโกรธ as in a phrase, like someone is mad and he said that the word ใจ and โกรธ are together. Well, the word ใจ and โกรธ are together with, well, there are some other syntactic elements involved, like ใจมันโกรธ. If it's ใจมันโกรธ, and in that case ใจ is the topicalized, it's not the subject, but man is the subject that refers to ใจ, which is interesting because ใจโกรธ don't stand together, but they have the modifiers ใจมันโกรธ, ใจยังโกรธอยู่, ใจ still mad. So it's interesting how we can analyze that, but according to my background in English linguistics, it's just that well, we need those modifiers to complete, to satisfy Rice's maxim of quantity for some reason, because ใจโกรธ is somehow is not enough for Thai people. You have to have some other modifiers to make the sentence or the phrase complete.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and he got examples from different places, like from novels, from conversation, and from publications. So they're from different sources, but it's very interesting and it's very rigorous how he researched the use of the word ใจ in Thai.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or perhaps comments? I think everyone is already happy with what they've heard, and perhaps they've already seen different insights from different languages.
There's one comment on the chat. Miguel is asking, I mean, effect. Well, I'm not sure what we can do with it. I mean,
from Mr. Garcia, right?
Yeah. Perhaps Miguel, would you like to raise your question? You can unmute yourself. He's actually my friend. He's also from the Philippines.
Okay.
Oh no, sorry. I was talking about what Jason was saying a while ago. The damdamin, perhaps. I think, although I'm not like well versed in translation, but I think that's how I would perhaps translate damdamin in English. I think affect would be my translation.
Mm-hmm.
So and that wasn't really a question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, when you guys say that you're not good at translation, I don't know what it means for anyone to be good at translation. I mean, we all do this. We all do this. I mean, it's a different thing to actually translate something professionally.
Right.
But you know, if you're bilingual and if you live in at least two linguistic worlds, then you are translators. You are translators. Even if you don't do it purposely, you do it anyway. So I suppose it's just a matter of bringing out what's inside you anyway, and making it a more conscious process. But the process is there.
Right. I think like at a personal level, whenever a translation is done, focusing on or touching upon on what you mentioned earlier, that there are some things that are lost and there are also some things that are added. I think one reason is like our choices, our reasons for translations. There are times when the translation becomes more emotive because of our emotional intention, and therefore it affects the level of translation and even the additional meaning into it. There are also times when you translate, you just wanted to give like a description of it. So if we're looking at the semantic fields, it may perhaps be a good way to explain how others look into translation. And I think most translation are focusing on like texts. What I think is also interesting is how people translate in a very verbal manner. I think that would also explain culture and capture the immediate, cultural construction in the mind of the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something I was trying to think earlier while you were delivering your talk. And I find that really interesting. That's why I synthesize it as translation is a site of, cultural production, reproduction, and negotiation. That's when we try to change the meaning the way we see it.
I find it very appropriate, Joey. I mean, there's an interesting detail about the Polish word for translation, tłumaczenie, and the Polish word itself is ambiguous. It can either mean translation from one language to another, or it can mean explanation.
Right.
Explanation. The very term for the process is ambiguous. It involves both transfer of interlinguistic transfer and the process of explaining. So that's even in the very notion itself, you've got this idea of what it means to translate. At least for a Polish speaker, when you think about it, you see the ambiguity or the polysemy of the very notion, of the very process. It's very interesting.
Right, like this is like what, I don't know if there's such term, like this lingua cultural mediations that happens which resides within the mind of a speaker at the time he or she translates not just words but meaning and transfer experiences.
Yeah, I wonder if that wasn't, I mean, you never know what's in the speaker's mind, but I would perhaps risk a kind of a bold statement about Olga Tokarczuk when she delivered that lecture. Of course, she's a brilliant writer and a super intelligent person. And she knew that even though she delivered it in Polish, that lecture will be translated into other languages, English to begin with. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't make much sense to deliver a Nobel speech. I mean, just for the Polish audience, that makes no sense. So it has to be translated, as a standard procedure. And of course, she realized that when she plays with this very, very complex notion of the tender translator, tender narrator, and tenderness, translators will struggle with it. And there will be all kinds of things happening to it in different languages. Mm-hmm. And maybe, just maybe there will be a good question to ask her, Verita, when you interview her eventually, whether this wasn't a conscious strategy on her part to actually expect these translations to be different. And in that sense, to enlarge that notion, which comes in Polish, it comes through Polish. If it's only limited to Polish, it covers a certain conceptual sphere. But when it's transferred into these different lingua cultures, that sphere grows and grows and grows, and it goes ad infinitum. It's an open-ended process of enrichment, loss, but also gain and enrichment. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was some kind of conscious strategy on her part,
right?
Which is a very clever trick that she played. Being, I mean, through that lecture, of course, she talked about literature, but that lecture is a piece of literature in its own right. Okay, it's also a literary work of art. So ambiguity and polysemy and paradox and contradiction are all there as an inherent features of any literary work of art.
Right, and I think like one interesting thing is that when she was translating this, I'm not sure if there's that sense of compensatory strategies, like the loss of certain meanings are compensated by a greater meaning to capture perhaps interest or to captivate people's heart. But there is this something that I noticed earlier, like there is like a leveling, like the levels of translation provided. Then the latter part is like the core of the intention, like when tenderness was being discussed. So I was thinking that in the loss part, because I thought there is something interesting about losing certain dimensions of meaning could actually mean a strategy to compensate for another thing. So as of now, I couldn't say anything, but that's what I'm feeling after listening to his speech earlier. I mean, to her speech earlier.
Yeah, loss is inevitable. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, it's kind of trivial to say that we lose things when you translate. Of course we do. Of course we do. It's in the nature of the process. I mean, the only thing not to lose anything is not to translate. Okay, once you engage in translation, you lose things. But then what is it that you lose and what you do with it? I mean, what you gain instead and how you can compensate for it, and what makes and what doesn't make sense. This is all about finding your way within these very complex universes and different lingual cultural worlds.
Thank you for that. I already typed your questions. I really hope that would work out, that we would actually have Olga Tokarczuk and we can talk to her. But with regards to what Joey said, it just reminds me, this compensatory, just reminds me of the title of her wonderful constellation novel, Flights, which in Polish is Bieguni. As a Slavic speaker, the word behać, it's like in Czech and Slovak too, it means like to run, and Bieguni is a sect. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful title, but then it cannot be translated into English. Hence, flights. And it's a wonderful choice of words as well, because it also compensates for this very specific meaning of Bieguni. If anyone doesn't know, it's a sect. Orthodox sect of which that we're not encouraged to actually stay still. How would I say, the monks were actually encouraged to actually run around, to wander, because to be fixed in a certain place or certain time, you also risk taking in preconceived notions that you don't question, the values of your society. You stay stagnant in your thought. Hence that's the importance of the word bieguni, and it cannot be translated into English, because it would be, the footnote has to be provided and so on and so forth. But it's good to see, good to know normally when we talk about flights, it's good to talk about the original title in Polish, and it kind of complements each other. So maybe that's how it's compensated too, because flights is like, it's bigger. The spectrum of the meaning is actually wider.
Yeah,
I would talk to her about that. Yeah,
I would encourage everyone to read the book, because it's a wonderful book, and it's not really about that sect. The title comes from, but it's not really, the book isn't really about it. It's much more universal than that. And even the Polish title isn't very clear for Polish readers. Bieguni, I mean, if you don't know about the sect, not very many people do. I mean, people will only be beginning to learn about it through that book, but the title is kind of strange. It sounds strange at first glance for the Polish ear, and it has to do with running. Bieguni are people who run. I mean, biegać is to run. And then I've heard comments from a French translator that's French, but also English speaking, that the French title would probably be more into peregrination. I don't really speak French that well, so I don't have that intuition about the French. But there's a word in French that has to do not so much with running, but with engaging on a kind of pilgrimage or peregrination, not in the religious sense, but in the sense of looking for the essence of life, for the quest for the essence of life through the action of this nomadic kind of lifestyle in its own right, okay? Because that enriches your perspective on how things are in the world. Whereas standing still is stagnation, is something that deprives you of that more profound insight. So it's a very difficult title to translate, and then a very rich one as well. Yes, of course. Yeah.
I think it's Les Pérégrins. It's the Wanderers.
The Wanderers. Yes.
All right, I think we have a very thought-provoking discussion of translation. for me, it's actually really eye-opening to look at how translation, bring this experience. I was so hooked in the process of discussing how each word differs and different experiences it actually brings. And we thank you a lot, Professor Adam, for your time and for sharing us this insightful talk on cultural linguistics. I'm definite that our participants have learned a lot and perhaps are thinking of research projects. And probably that's one of the things that they are now considering. And at this point, we would like to offer our thanks from the Faculty of Arts. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I thank all of you who have been active.
Thank you, Adam, for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope to see you again.
Yes,
definitely. We'll find a reason to invite you over.
Yes, okay, yes. And yeah, of course, feel invited as well. I mean, we have this exchange going and we just need to wait and see when traveling becomes possible again. And
yes, yeah, these days, the students, they request or they want to go to European countries more. So yes, so Poland will be one of the good choice for them.
Yes. Yeah, I extend my thanks to all of you for making this happen and for being there, and to the dean of your faculty, and to whoever was engaged in the Joey. Special thanks to you for taking care of the discussion and the technical side to it, and Nirada and Verita and all of you who participated in the discussion as well.
It's really great to see you again, actually.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our participants, if you wanted to be updated with the talks of the Faculty of Arts, feel free to like the page at www.facebook.com/facultyofarts.shula, or you can also visit the website at www.arts.shula.ac.th. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Joey.
Stay healthy.
Bye.
Stay well.
Bye.
Dziękuję bardzo. Do widzenia.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.